Now, some of you may have noticed that all is not harmony in these isles of ours. In the far Celtic regions, the natives are becoming restless. In Who's Who, one famous Scottish poet lists his recreation as Anglophobia. It is a prejudice shared by my next guest, Scots author Gordon Williams, guests I meant to say, and Valerie Wynne Williams, all the way from English-dominated Welsh Wales. Taking all this on his chin, keeping a stiff upper lip, disdainfully raising an eyebrow, is Ted Malt, as English as raspberry jam. Sandra will talk to him later, but first let me deal with the Celtic fringe. Gordon, what have you got against the English?
I think there's far too many of them. And they live far too near Scotland. And they don't seem to really care very much about other people's worries and problems. They just say, "Oh, really, old boy?" And I always found, I was brought up in the street where if you wore your dentures midweek, that was the classification for middle class. And poverty was, or is still in Scotland, of a horrific nature compared to England in general. It's only a couple of years ago that they found in a Glasgow tenement there was no indoor sanitation, no hot water, anything like that, and the people were actually walking quarter mile to a public convenience, which was a bit inconvenient in the middle of the night in a rainstorm, as you can imagine. Now, these kind of conditions are so horrific, bare feet and children, the squalor of Scotland. Now, what you'll find is this, that you come down to England. I remember going to a Scottish nationalist thing years ago when they were a party of cranks with kilts, vegetarians. Nobody took them seriously. But they had one speaker, and he said to us all at the monument to Sir William Wallace, the great patriot who was beheaded and quartered and his head taken around London as a sort of tourist thing. He said, "The Englishman has all the qualities of a poker without its occasional warmth." And I'm afraid is the picture that one has of the English. I was kissing my 3 English children goodnight as I was leaving to come to this thing. Don't watch this programme because I'm actually going to say I hate you. But it's not actually the Englishman that one meets, the Ted Malt. I think of this bowler-hatted chap who's been making the money over the centuries, ever since the Scottish drunks were bribed into taking the Union in Parliament.
OK, well, let's hear what Valerie, what do you hate about the English or dislike about the English?
Well, let's establish it first of all. I don't hate the English. Some of my best friends are English, and unlike Violet Elizabeth, I don't hate them. But what I do hate, and that is the English bureaucratic state, and that is something different. Because to me, a state should be something that works for a nation, and not a nation which is subjugated to the state. And this is what we have in Wales. We have a state of affairs where we, as a nation, are being destroyed by the state. And that is something, they are trying to make me a second-class citizen in my own country. Not that they're succeeding for a moment.
What? Can I ask you, Valerie, when you discovered, because, I mean, you must have been brought up in school with the same Queen, with the same national anthem, with the same selection of heroes, presuming the books came down from the Ministry of Education in London. When did you discover that you were, in fact, different?
Well, my Welsh history book, in fact, said that in 1282, the history of Wales finished. Which gives you a context of what we had to put up with. Now, when did I become aware of being Welsh? I think it started about the age of 9. I can remember having a history lesson and the schoolmaster saying to me, "Valerie, stand up." I stood up, and then he turned to the rest of the class and he said, "Now here is a typical Iberian. The little dark people..."
Sounds like a breed of sheepdog.
No, the little dark people who are living on this island 1,000 years before the Romans came. And that is the seed, I think, that first was set there, and I knew I was different.
What's your idea of the typical Englishman? Your image?
I think perhaps one does think of him as being rather a Colonel Blimp. But it isn't that. I think that what I do object in Englishmen is perhaps their arrogance towards us in Wales. And the fact, more than anything, that they don't really sympathise the fact that we, as a nation, what makes us different is mostly the language. And that is the key. I mean, when, as a nation, you've got something very precious that you must transfer, your whole civilization, to the next generation. And the key to that in Wales is the language.
Isn't there something odd, and perhaps Gordon, but both of you, I mean, it seems to one in London, that the whole of Scottish nationalism, the whole of Welsh nationalism is contained in the crowd at Hampden Park or the crowd at Cardiff Arms Park. Isn't that, if nationalism is only that, isn't that a failure of a nation? Gordon?
Yeah, but it's a failure of a nation because the nation has been destroyed. And for years, going to Hampden Park with a half bottle of whiskey and singing, if you hate Alf Ramsey, clap your hands, or whatever the England manager was, I hate the bloody lot of them, really. That was the only time you actually were a nation. There was 140,000. You never heard the English ones speaking at all. They were kept very quiet. And that was your only chance. And you see that the thing has come now that I think education, and people can see that other countries are getting things through various forms of action. It's been Labour Party policy to have a government for Scotland since the days of Kerr Hardy. And they have never once talked about it until the Scottish Nationalist Party was. See, I'm not in actual agreement with the National Party, but it just is indicative. I saw a programme the other night and 2 English MPs go up to Scotland. And they were amazed. They said, my dear chap, he said, I had no idea they have their own radio programmes, you know. And I thought, he was an MP for Lancashire.
You live here, Gordon, don't you? Aren't you in fact biting the hand that feeds you?
Yeah, but the hand that feeds me is the one that destroyed the chance that ever I had of staying at home in that wonderful paradise north of Gretna Green. We're dragged away. Millions, there's a million in London alone.
You owe England and the English nothing?
Well, I think we owe them quite a lot for defending us from the Germans during the war, but then I think it was mainly the frontline regiments were all Scottish. At least that's what my mother told us. The Scots and the English were all back in the mess as officers.
You were telling me earlier about Bobby Moore. Why do you think they, and what you were saying to Bobby Moore and how he didn't understand why 140,000 stood up and said, if you hate Alf Ramsey, clap your hands. Why do you think the English don't have the same passion about it as you have?
Well, I mean, England's a huge country. And Scotland's only 5 million. It's like asking an American, why isn't he worried about the Red Indian? I mean, it's only like we're like the Negroes in the deep south, the Scottish and the Irish, I would suggest. We're second-class citizens. You've got to work twice as hard if you come to London. You have to come to London. There's nothing much up in Scotland except the rain and pubs and alcoholism, and that's about it.
Right. But surely the English are now starting to get head up about it with this question of devolution. Let's face it. I mean, now they're really getting. They're thinking that we in Wales and the Scottish people are going to get something that they're going to miss out on. And for the first time, you're having English nationalism coming into it.
OK, let's hear from an English nationalist. Sandra.
Thanks, Llew. Well, Ted North, there's far too many of you. You're arrogant, you don't care about others, you're like a poker without warmth. Plead the case for the Englishman.
Well, of course, there are too many of us because we've been diluted by Welsh and Scots. All the good ones have come here. You only got the dross left for a start. And, well, you know, I mean, OK, I can appreciate when you're in a majority, it's easy to become complacent. Security is what you have. And I can appreciate that it's necessary to the desires and anguish of the minority. And I appreciate the Welsh language. But why aren't we discussing it in Gaelic or Welsh? The reason is because the tribes can't understand each other for a start.
And I wouldn't understand a word you said.
I don't think the English wish to be defensive because I mean, all right.
Is it because you're not passionate enough that you don't wish to be defensive? I mean, they've just talked about you as being unpassionate. That's not the right word. Impassionate.
Yes.
Not passionate.
Not passionate. That's what I'm looking
for. What? You see, Gordon talks about the situation in the Gorbals. Well, I've been to the Gorbals, but what they don't realise, they want more housing, more social services. That can only be acquired if they give less of something else. Now, what are they going to give up?
Decision-making is what we really
want. Well, you can decide. I mean, any place, look. If you're a dry area or a wet area, I mean, you've got that prerogative for a start. I mean, you can't. I'll allow this, you see, Sandra. You can't ignore the Welsh. I've been to Smithfield all week, and there's no doubt Scotland, with less arable land than Yorkshire, they're doing the damnedest, aren't they, on nothing, have managed to get the champion and the reserve champion, Aberdeen Angus, Cross Charlotte, which is French. Then there's a Welsh pig breed, which is absolutely full of Swedish landrace, you see, and they'll deny it.
The thing will be eaten by Englishmen, that's the terrible thing. The first prize, the one with the red on it, will be eaten by Englishmen.
But why?
Well, the Englishmen, yeah, well, I mean, if you've got to demolish the capitalist system, we'll have another programme.
Do you think you're being arrogant, Ted?
Well, yes. Yes, I mean, no, look, my point is this. I love this. I mean, Scots and Welsh, and the Celtic Fringe are very amusing people. They live on the fringe, peripheral areas of the Great Britain. I always go to my holidays in Merriall. I've learned one or two Welsh words like buch, which is cat. Is that right? Is that
Thank
right?
you.
Thank you. I've said that. And Scotland, fantastic place. But consider what England have given them. And incidentally, William Wallace was killed in Smithfield, and I'm not defending Edward I. Terrible, William Wallace. But then...
You did give us a lovely thing, in fact. You gave us a beautiful castle in Carnarvonshire, which the English built, and it was English money that we built it. But the joke is on you, because we now go in for half price, and the English have to pay the full price to go and see their own castle.
Well, look back. Who are the worst swine in Wales and Scotland? I'll tell you, themselves. Who dismantled the clan system? Well, after the 45 Jacobite rebellion, it was the clan.